Hey everybody, and welcome to this special on Chiron going retrograde. I'm Amani. I'm a karmic, holistic, astrological life coach, and I like to go in depth in all that I do, and all of my interpretations, especially when it comes to Venus, Mercury, Sun transits and everything really, are based on Vedic astrology, which is based on where the planets or the luminaries, which are the sun and the moon, are any given time in the sky, and all times are in GMT time as well. So yeah, thanks for listening, and yeah. So this year, Chiron went into Aries on the 3rd of May at 11:15 a.m. and it goes retrograde on the 30th of July at 3:42. Then Chiron enters Pisces on the 31st of October at 11:30 p.m. until the 2nd of January 2026 at 2:38 p.m. GMT time, when Chiron goes direct while still in Pisces. So yeah, this year when Chiron goes retrograde in the 3rd degree of Pisces at 3:42 GMT time, it's making aspects with Venus in a nice sextile, a quinquat with Mars, a square with Pluto, a nice sort of biquintile with the moon's north node, and a quinquat to the ascendant. And the primary Sabin symbol is a cameo profile of a man in the outline of his country. And the energetic frequency of this year's Chiron retrograde is deep identity healing with authentic leadership undercurrents, tones, vibrations. So Chiron, our beloved wounded healer, is about to perform his most sacred ritual, turning backwards through the pioneering, initiating spontaneous fires of Aries, while simultaneously holding the mirror to our deepest leadership wounds. So it's the universe's invitation to crave, step up, reform, reshape your authentic self from the raw marble of your experiences, like a master sculptor creating a cameo that captures not just your face but your entire soul's country. So if you believe in reincarnation, integrating all your lessons learned from your past lives, the lessons learned from this life, and stepping into the direction that you want to go for the rest of your life, day by day, step by step. The wounded healer is asking us to see and accept our scars as our greatest strengths. So it's asking us to revisit, review and heal our deepest wounds around identity, leadership and authentic self-expression. When Chiron, the wounded healer archetype, this is what Chiron represents in astrology, goes retrograde in the individualistic sign of Aries, we're called to courageously examine the ways our early wounds have shaped our identity and either limited our authentic self-expression or become the very source of our wisdom and healing gifts. So Aries is ruled by Mars, and this rules our sense of individual identity, our capacity for leadership, whether it's leading others or leading ourselves, right? And our ability to initiate, to start things, to start projects, to take action, and our relationship with courage, standing up, not conforming, walking our own paths, dancing to the beat of our own drum, doing our own thing, stepping into main character energy. So you get what I mean. So when Chiron moves backwards through this sign, it creates a unique opportunity to heal the wounds that have prevented us from fully stepping into our authentic power and transform our pain into the very foundation of our ability to lead and inspire ourselves and others. So positively, it allows for deep healing of identity wounds and childhood trauma, affecting self-expression, the development of authentic leadership based on vulnerability and wisdom rather than ego, the integration of painful experiences into sources of strength and compassion, the courageous examination of family and culture patterns that limit authentic identity, the healing of wounds around anger, assertiveness and healthy aggression, and the development of a pioneering spirit that serves collective healing rather than personal gain. And it allows us to integrate the masculine and feminine aspects of our identity and leadership and transform our victim consciousness into wounded healer wisdom. But negatively, it can reopen old identity wounds without proper healing and integration, because we may ignore them, numb ourselves to them, or just refuse to do that shadow work, that inner child healing work, that self-acceptance and forgiveness and love work that needs to be done. There can be a tendency towards victim mentality or martyr complex, being like, well, others need me, there's nothing I can do about my life because my family want me to do this, my lover wants me to do that, my friends need me to do this, and refusing to take responsibility for your life direction, especially around identity issues like who are you? You may feel lost. Your sense of self may be made up of other people's expectations. We can regress, fall back into patterns of aggression or anger as a defense mechanism, avoid leadership opportunities due to unhealed wounds around power, self-sabotage when approaching success or recognition. There can be confusion about authentic identity versus wounded identity. There can be a tendency to wound others through unconscious projection of unhealed pain, so saying words that hurt, doing things that hurt, not respecting other people's boundaries, that sort of thing. And we can spiritual bypass not doing a necessary identity or any other healing work that needs to be done. So the best use of Chiron retrograde in the 3rd degree of Aries is to focus on deep identity healing work, examining childhood patterns that affect self-expression and developing authentic leadership based on vulnerability and wisdom. So to practically integrate this energy into your day-to-day life while Chiron is in retrograde, spend time in identity healing work with qualified professionals, practice vulnerable, authentic self-expression in safe environments, develop leadership skills that integrate wisdom gained through healing, examine family and culture patterns that limit authentic identity expression, practice healthy anger expression and assertiveness training, create art, writing or other expressions that integrate your healing journey, spend time in spiritual warrior training that honours both strength and vulnerability. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit deeper about the planetary energies involved in this year's Chiron retrograde. So Chiron, as I said, represents the wounded healer archetype, the part of us that has been deeply wounded but transforms that wounding into wisdom, compassion and ability to heal others because we have healed ourselves, or more correctly healing ourselves and managing ourselves and the psychological, emotional, spiritual, financial and physical levels. As the bridge between the personal and transpersonal planets, although Chiron is an asteroid, it represents the sacred wound that never fully heals but becomes our greatest source of wisdom and service to ourselves and others. Aries energy in astrology flows with a pioneering spirit. It's ruled by Mars. It is all about individual identity, leadership, starting things, giving us the motivation to initiate new beginnings. This cardinal fire sign symbolises the warrior archetype, the part of us that will fight and stand up and empower ourselves, and the capacity for healthy aggression and the courage to be authentically yourself regardless of social pressure or expectation. So when Chiron travels retrograde through Aries, we can experience next level alchemy of transforming our deepest identity wounds into our greatest leadership strengths. This combination asks us to become wounded warriors, not victims of our circumstances, but conscious leaders who use their healing journey as a source of wisdom and inspiration for others. The retrograde motion intensifies this healing work, asking us to go back through layers of identity conditioning to find our authentic core, we're called to become real leaders, not because we're perfect, but because we're real healers, not because we've never been broken, but because we've learned to transform our brokenness into beauty. So overall, in terms of the practical meanings, Chiron Retrograde wants us to integrate our personal wounds into collective service. It's an ideal time for deep therapy work, leadership training that includes vulnerability, and developing your unique contribution to collective healing. So starting that YouTube channel, that podcast, writing that book, starting that project, remembering that there's people out there who will only listen to the way you deliver a message. A million other people may be saying it, but there's certain people who will only listen to the message that comes from you. So don't ever think, there's so many people already saying this, there's no room for me. There's room for you, because only you can be you. But without consciously spending time in the moment and working with this energy, this transit can lead to identity crisis, like who am I, what am I doing, victim mentality, spiritual bypassing of the necessary healing work, as I said, and unconscious wounding of others through, not healing yourself. So watch out for that. This is doubly important during this time. In terms of the financial consequences, positively, income through healing work or authentic leadership, investment in identity healing and development, financial decisions based on authentic values rather than ego. So it's time to invest in personal development courses, a book, spending time listening to podcasts, reading books. It doesn't always have to be spending money. It can be taking ownership to, seek out your own research and sort of like manage your own healing journal. Negatively, there can be financial losses through identity crisis, expensive healing work, so spending the money on things without integrating, or just showing up to these things but not doing the homework and the extra things that's needed to integrate what you learn in these things that you spend money on. So be careful, only spend on things that you are willing to work through, and only because something's expensive doesn't mean it's more valuable than something that's cheaper. And you can just base financial decisions on wounded ego rather than wisdom, so spending on things to numb your pain rather than dealing with your pain. Politically, positively, authentic leaders can emerge from healing work, policies that confront collective wounding, and leadership that integrates vulnerability with strength. But negatively, political leaders can project unhealed wounds and policies that, perpetuate victim consciousness and turns people into a victim rather than helping them to heal from generational dysfunction or their pain. And there can be leadership based on spiritual bypassing rather than real healing. One leader saying this part is to blame for the worst problems, and then the other party saying no, it's that party's political party's fault, and just going round and round in circles, not really solving anything, which we kind of are seeing right now in the world. In terms of the materialistic social collective consequences, it can lead to social movements that are led by wounded healers, focusing on healing self-identity wounds and helping people integrate individual authenticity with collective service. But negatively, it can lead to collective identity crisis, social movements based on victim consciousness rather than empowerment work, the spiritual bypassing of necessary social healing work. There can be psychological consequences. So positively, this can lead to deep identity healing and integration, development of authentic self-expression, transformation of victim consciousness into wounded healer wisdom. Negatively, it can lead to identity fragmentation, psychological regression, spiritual bypassing of necessary psychological healing work. In terms of the esoteric hidden consequences, it can lead to the integration of your soul purpose with personality healing, the development of authentic spiritual leadership, healing of spiritual wounds around power and authority. But negatively, it can again lead to spiritual bypassing of identity healing work, false spiritual authority based on unhealed wounds, spiritual victim consciousness. In terms of the symbolic, emotional, creative meanings, It can help us with our creative expression healing journey as we integrate artistic traits with our personal identity, and this can help with collective healing and give the symbolic understanding of identity transformation. Negatively, our creative expression can again perpetuate, carry on the victim mentality, which can lead to artistic spiritual bypassing, not using our creative talents because they're blocked, right? And also symbolic confusion around authentic identity. So rather than creating art or writing or anything else creative that you want to do, thinking, oh, I have to do it like other people, I can't create my own form, I can't do it my own way. And the purpose of creativity and art, right, is it's meant to represent you, not logical technique, but creative expression, spontaneous. And Chiron's in Aries, and that's all about spontaneous, taking the initiative and expressing your individuality. So that's the best use of this energy. So now I'm going to talk about the aspects that Chiron's making when it goes retrograde this year. So Chiron's making a sextile with Venus, as I said earlier. This is separating now at 2 degrees. All of these aspects are going to flavour the whole time that Chiron's in retrograde. So Chiron's staying in retrograde for just over 5 months. So this allows us to bring beauty, grace, charm, balance, harmony, and this can add love also to the healing process, and it supports the development of self-love, acceptance, forgiveness, and the ability to find beauty in your healing journey. Negatively, it can lead to superficial approaches to deep healing work. So again, it can add to spiritual bypassing. So don't try and do everything all at once. Be gentle with yourself as you do the necessary shadow and inner child work. Mars makes a quincunx to Chiron, and this is applying at 1.42 degrees, so quite strong. It brings a dynamic energy to identity healing, so it supports the integration of healthy anger and assertiveness with compassionate healing wisdom. But negatively, it can cause conflicts between action and healing, leading to impatience with the healing process and the tendency to wound others through unconscious aggressive expression. So it's important to be mindful of your emotions at this time, because you can just, the subconscious can make, say, angry words and do angry actions without being conscious. So if you can stay present as much as you can through this Chiron retrograde, that's important too. Pluto makes a square to Chiron as well. So this allows for the transformative healing work and the deep healing work that's needed, and it supports the complete transformation of identity wounds into sources of authentic power and wisdom. So this is really good. It really supports that deep inner work, but it can also create negatively intense healing crisis, power struggles with others around healing authority, or the tendency to use healing work manipulative. So watch out for fake spiritual or healers and stuff like that, people trying to take your power away, or you trying to take other people's power away. Yes, we can use podcasts and books and listen to spiritual teachers, go to therapists and stuff, but ultimately we have to take authority over our healing journey. That's the end goal, right? To stand in our own power and reclaim it. Outside sources are just there to help us and guide us on the way to self-empowerment. Chiron also makes a biquintal to the south node, so this is separating, but it's only separating at 0.49 degrees, so it's quite strong influence as Chiron stays retrograde for 5 months. So this brings innovative approaches to healing past life wounds and karmic patterns, and supports the creative integration of ancient healing wisdom. Because it's separating, we may miss opportunities for creative healing integration, or resist learning from past healing experiences, or learning from past mistakes and stuff like that. So it's very important that you commit to doing the work that's need to be done to help you integrate your sense of self as Chiron's in retrograde. Chiron also makes a quincunx to the ascendant as it goes retrograde this year, and this is at 1.48 degrees applying. So the positives is that it brings plenty of opportunities for us to change and integrate healing work with authentic self presentation, supporting the development of an identity that includes rather than hides your healing journey. So it allows you to, not be ashamed of your past experiences and mistakes, or your weaknesses, seeing that the strengths, this is wounded healer energy, asking us to claim our wounds and to step into our power. But negatively, it can create awkwardness between inner healing work and outer self-expression, and we can have a difficulty in integrating the wounded healer identity with personal identity. We may reject, because a lot of the time society, the cultures were brought up into help us deny or wants us to ignore emotional expression, authentic emotional expression, and all of that, and say, oh no, emotions and all of that's not part of my identity. So it's very important for you to see your wounds and past experiences that, like with rejection and abandonment and heartbreak, as part of your journey to becoming you, rather than things that are going to hold you back from experiencing love or acceptance or progress in your life again, So now I'm just going to talk about the Sabian symbols that are affecting this year's Chiron retrograde. So as I said, Chiron's in the 3rd degree of Aries, and this falls the cerebellum in the human body, and it wants us to integrate our personal identity with collective service. So this symbols represents the integration of individual identity with collective purpose, and the ability to see ourselves as both a unique individual and an integral part of a larger whole. The cameo shows a refined artistic representation of identity, whilst the country outline indicates service to the collective. From a Jungian perspective, this represents the integration of the personal ego with the collective unconscious, the ability to authentically serve the greater good while also healing ourselves. It's the realization that our deepest wounds are our greatest gifts, and they're meant to serve not just personal healing but collective transformation. Mars is in the 2nd degree of Virgo, and the Sabian symbol is a large white cross, stands alone on top of a hill, and this rules the small intestine in the human body, and this brings the power to stand firm in sacred purpose despite isolation. So this gives us the power to stand up for what we believe in, regardless if other people say it's not right or we should believe this or that. So the Sabian symbol, a large white cross, stands alone on top of a high hill. So this symbol represents spiritual dedication, the willingness to stand alone for sacred purposes, and the courage to maintain spiritual purpose even in isolation. The cross symbolises sacrifice and spiritual commitment, whilst the high hill indicates elevated perspective and visibility. In terms of the psychological meaning, this represents the self archetype, willing to stand alone for truth and spiritual principles, integrating service and sacrifice, and the courage to maintain spiritual integrity regardless of social approval. Pluto's in the 9th degree of Capricorn, which has the Sabian symbol and angel carrying a harp, and this rules the nerves of the knee, and it allows divine music to flow through our body. So this symbol represents the manifestation of divine harmony on earth. The angel symbolises higher consciousness, whilst the heart represents the creation of beauty and harmony through structured discipline and practice. Psychologically, this represents the self-archetype manifesting through creative expression, the divine spark creating beauty and harmony through earthly instruments and disciplined practice. The ascendant is in the 2nd degree of Scorpio, and the Sabian symbology for this is a broken bottle and spilled perfume, and this rules the youthful meatus, which is part of our genitalia, reproductive system, and this wants us to release beauty through being broken open. So the symbol represents the release of beauty and the essence through breaking open. Our wounds, our experiences can break us sometimes, And it reminds us that transformation can come from and through destruction, and the way our most precious qualities are often revealed is through our breaking points. The perfume represents our essential nature, whilst the broken bottle shows the Saturn that allows us to develop our true essence. So, the life experiences that, hurt us, and us being able to find the strength to overcome this. So that's the broken bottle, and psychologically this represents the shadow work necessary for transformation, the breaking open of protective containers to allow our true essence to emerge and touch the world. So now I'm going to talk about the positive and negative astrological meanings of each Sabian symbol. So in terms of the individual positive meanings, Chiron in the 3rd degree of Aries brings our attention to refined self-awareness and the integration of individual and collective purpose and artistic self-expression, and being our legit selves, stepping into our real power. Mars in the 2nd degree of Virgo, the cross on the hill, wants us to grow into spiritual dedication, the courage of our convictions, our beliefs, to stand true and firm on them, the willingness to serve despite isolation, and to take an elevated perspective, not one that says, oh, I'm better than you, but one that sees the bigger picture and sees that a lot of time when people are trying to hurt us, it's because they're hurting themselves. And this is not to allow them to do it, but just to understand, or what the Rastafarian culture calls overstand, humanity and why people do certain things. And this is why it's important to take accountability for what happens in your life, because outside people will always say, no, you should do it my way, or give excuses, but you must have the understanding to realise what's good for you and what you can accept in your life at a close distance, or what you need to what you can only accept at a long distance. Some people, you have to love them from a distance, which is also a great song by a reggae artist called Garnet Silk. The angel with the harp, Pluto's here, wants us to tap into our divine creativity and find harmony through discipline, bringing heaven to earth through inspired, creative, artistic expression. So it reminds us of our thoughts, and how if we don't have to think positive thoughts all the time, but if we can control our thoughts, we're training us to think positive at least some of the time. This can uplift our life. So it's all about healing from the inside out. The broken bottle, the perfume, shows our essential nature that can be revealed through crisis and beauty emerging from brokenness, leading to that transformative release. But negatively, Chiron in the 3rd degree of Aries can lead to superficial identity, ego inflation, nationalism, like my country's better than yours. We've got a lot of that going on. My beliefs are better than yours. Inflexible self-image based on external recognition rather than internal validation, that comes from accepting yourself for who you are, rather than, seeking outside praise or living through likes on social media and stuff like that. The cross on the hill, where Mars is, can lead negatively to and add to the martyrdom complex, spiritual arrogance, isolation through judgment, and suffering without purpose. The angel with the harp, where Pluto is in, can lead to disconnection from reality, perfectionist spiritual standards, spiritual bypassing of earthly responsibilities. The broken bottle of perfume can lead to destructive loss, waste of precious resources, and inability to contain beauty and scattered essence. So combinedly, in terms of the positive meanings, these symbols create a powerful narrative of authentic identity development through spiritual dedication, which ultimately serves a divine purpose, where we can carve our identity in service to the collective and stand firm in our spiritual purpose and bring divine harmony to earth, and allows our true essence and our nature to emerge through transformative healing, and by breaking open, by accepting our wounds and working through them. But negatively, these symbols can represent a pattern of ego inflation, just thinking you know it all, and spiritual martyrdom, thinking, oh, I've got to sacrifice and I've got to suffer and accept abuse because of my religious or cultural beliefs. This is where a lot of us get religion and spiritual beliefs wrong. We can understand people, we can guide them in healthy ways, but we should never allow them to abuse us or abuse others with our spiritual or religious beliefs either. It can lead to disconnected idealism and chaotic destruction that wastes rather than transforms precious resources, So, spiritual materialism, overspending on spiritual items, or creating spiritual content that says that if you don't have money and stuff like that, you're not spiritual, because God works on abundance, which is true, but abundance works in different levels. And if we think about all the money in the world, if you're going to say it's about money, right? Well, if it was all split, we would only have, it's still a lot of money, about £30,000 each, because that's what would happen to all the money. And £30,000 is a lot of money, but my whole point there, we can see that, like, in terms of abundance, that's a scarce way of looking at things, because in my country, you can barely buy a house for £30,000. So in that respect, it's a poverty mindset. The true meaning of spiritual abundance is, having that mindset that says that everyone should have a piece of land, have enough food, have access to all the world's resources, rather than saying that if you don't have access to these things, especially when you believe in spiritual things, that means that you are not spiritually abundant, that sort of thing. So it's about tapping into the true spiritual teachings on the esoteric occult hidden meanings. The cameo, third degree of Aries, wants us to recognize our soul signature across lifetimes and integrate our karma into service and allow our individual essence, our authentic self, to be refined through collective service. The cross on the hill where Mars is wants us to initiate the willingness to stand up to bear universal responsibility and go into that spiritual warrior mentality, maintaining sacred watch and being a beacon for others who are seeking truth. The angel with the heart acts as a divine messenger, bringing universal harmonies to earth, and the sacred musician playing the soul song, using heavenly music, healing wounds, and the broken bottle perfume leads to alchemical transformation, which can release spiritual essence through ego death, sacred breaking that births new consciousness, so allowing ourselves to be open to newness, but negatively in terms of the esoteric meanings. The third degree of Aries can lead to spiritual ego masquerading as service, false prophet, claiming divine mission, because there's a lot of that going on. And this is why I'm glad and I recommend the book called Glamour by Alice Bailey. And although I don't agree with everything that Alice Bailey stands for, and it's spiritual teacher, it's not about that. What we have to do is pick the meat to leave the bones with anything that we listen to, even with you listening to me here. But I'm glad I found that book because it talks about the glamour that we can fall into as we go on the spiritual journey, and anyone that says that, they are the reincarnation of Jesus or this, or say that their way is the only way, that's a false way, because there's so many people in the world, just like there's like 7-8 billion people in the world, there's at least that way, many ways to finding your spirituality. So people that become awakened, we've all got a voice to help people that will listen to us. Not everybody will listen to me, and I'm perfectly all fine with that, because my mission is to help those who I can help, and there's plenty of people out there who can only help the people that they can help, right? So anyone who says only my way is the right way, I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong. I'm just saying, we just watch out for false prophet, claiming divine mission or becoming one yourself. The cross on the hill that's represented by Mars in Virgo can add to the spiritual isolation through feeling superior than others, misuse of spiritual authority, carrying the cross that belongs to others. So again, the whole bringing attention to what's your stuff and what is other people's stuff and what you can control, which is typically only yourself. You can't control what other people do, you can only control what you do. The angel with the harp, where Pluto is, again warns us about false spiritual messaging, disconnection from earthly service, spending too much time in the clouds spiritually and not taking care of the earthly things. And it's all about balance, and spiritual performance without substance, just role playing spirituality, cosplaying it without actually doing it in your day-to-day life. The broken bottle of perfume on the esoteric level warns us of having a spiritual crisis without integration of the lessons that we need to learn, waste of our spiritual gifts, ego death without rebirth, and if we're going to, I don't want to say kill the ego, learn to manage the ego, we have to rebirth it into a new way, and we may have to do this several times. This is why I say we are never awakened, never woke, we are always awakening. So in terms of the combined esoteric meanings, it wants us to develop authentic soul identity, maintaining spiritual dedication despite challenges, bringing divine gifts to earth and allowing transformation through sacred breaking that releases your true essence for service. Negatively, these symbols represent the saddle path of spiritual development, including ego inflation disguised as service, spiritual martyrdom, disconnected idealism, and destructive spiritual crises that waste rather than transform consciousness. In terms of health influences, on the emotional level, each symbol confronts different aspects of emotional healing, identity integration, spiritual courage, divine connection, and transformation through being broken open. Combinedly, this creates a powerful blueprint for emotional healing that includes authentic self-expression, spiritual strength, divine guidance, and the courage to transform through crisis. In terms of our spiritual health, each symbol represents a different stage of spiritual development, identity integration, spiritual dedication, divine service, and transformation through sacred breaking. Combinedly, together they create a complete spiritual journey that honors both individual authenticity and collective service. In terms of physical health, the cerebellum wants us to bring balance and coordination and the integration of mind-body awareness, and this is the Sabian symbol of Chiron itself in the third degree of Aries. Mars in Virgo brings our attention to the small intestine, which represents looking after our digestive health, looking after the absorption of nutrients, but also taking the right foods and drinking enough water and discriminating between nourishing foods and toxic food, or situations, environments. The nerves of the knee, where Pluto is brings our attention to being flexible and supportive in our life's journey and having the courage to move forward. The youthful Metis, Scorpio, where the ascendant is, wants us to have proper hydration, healthy elimination practices, and emotional release work. So together they focus on us being, bringing balance and healthy discrimination and having flexible movement. So doing Tai Chi, yoga, exercise, rebounding, weights, anything that helps you find balance and meditation. And it wants us to take a holistic approach to managing our health and the mind, body and soul level. So how these Sabian symbols individually influence Chiron retrograde? Well, the Chiron in the third degree of Aries wants us to heal identity wounds while maintaining authentic self-expression in service to others. Mars in Virgo, the cross on the hill, challenges us to maintain spiritual dedication whilst integrating practical action. The Pluto square transforms our ability to bring divine harmony through earthly discipline and practice, and the ascendant Quinquas challenges us to integrate transformation and authentic self-expression presentation. So ultimately, these Sabian symbols is calling us to heal deep identity wounds while simultaneously at the same time developing authentic leadership that serves collective healing, and it wants us to focus on transforming our lives life and dealing with life's challenges practically, and it gives us opportunities for genuine self-expression. So in terms of the karmic meanings and lessons, positively, it wants us to learn to transform identity wounds into wisdom and authentic leadership, developing spiritual warrior consciousness that serves collective healing. Negatively, we can repeat patterns of victim consciousness, and it can add to spiritual bypassing of necessary identity healing work and using healing authority to avoid personal healing. So it's important to be open to the lesson that your deepest wounds are meant to become your greatest gifts, and that authentic leadership comes from vulnerability and wisdom rather than perfection. I know we're saying it's right that we go through all this pain in life, right? But my perspective always been like, we can't let the past win and steal our whole lives. We can't allow the people that hurt us, who probably didn't know better anyway, and this is not to limit anything you've been through, but we have to try and allow ourselves to work with what we got and to empower ourselves rather than let our past own mistakes and actions or the mistakes that others did to us dictate our whole lives. In terms of past life memories and dreams, memories of spiritual leadership, healing work or warrior training may come to your mind to guide current identity healing and authentic leadership development. Negatively, memories of abuse of spiritual authority and power, lifetimes where you may have been persecuted and hurt because of your identity, or wounds around your warrior energy can surface for healing and integration. So work with yourself or qualified professionals to process any difficult memories, using them as guidance for developing authenticity rather than, wounded authority where we abuse our power, sort of thing. In terms of collective karma, it gives us the opportunity to heal collective wounds around identity, leadership and spiritual authority, and it contributes to a more authentic and vulnerable leadership in the world. Negatively, collective patterns of victim consciousness and spiritual bypassing or wounded leadership based on unhealed trauma may be activated. So we have to focus on our own identity healing work rather than trying to heal others, knowing that your authentic healing contributes to collective healing. In terms of the relationship influences that Chiron Retrograde in Aries gives, in our family relationships, it allows us to heal wounds that originated in our family and develop authentic self-expression despite family conditioning, leading to family healing through vulnerable authenticity. But negatively, family conflict triggers by identity healing work can happen, and we can project family wounds onto current healing, and we can spiritually bypass the necessary family healing work we need to do. And there can be family drama because people don't want to address family wounds and stuff. So it's important to approach family healing with both courage and compassion, focusing on your own authentic development rather than trying to change family members. In terms of friendships, it allows us to attract friendships that support authentic identity development and share a healing journey with trusted friends, and developing friendships based on mutual growth rather than mutual wounding. Negatively, friendship conflicts triggered by identity changes, and we can use friendships to avoid deeper healing work, and we can bypass the necessary relationship healing that's needed in our friendships at this time. So choose friends who support your authentic development, and be willing to outgrow friendships that keep you in old identity patterns, and to let friendship go, because friends may decide that they don't want to be friends with you, and yes, it can hurt, but we have to let the old go to let the new in. And this is not to be flippant about friendship, so it's painful, but sometimes it has to happen. In terms of co-worker relationships, bring authentic leadership and healing wisdom to the workplace, develop a professional identity that integrates personal healing. Negatively, workplace conflicts can be triggered by identity healing changes. Inappropriate sharing of the healing process in professional settings can happen, and there can be spiritual bypassing of workplace relationship healing, ignoring to heal relationships. And sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes we can't heal some relationships in the workplace, but we can be cordial, and it wants us to integrate our healing wisdom into our professional identity while maintaining appropriate boundaries about personal healing. In terms of committed couples, it can deepen relationships through said healing work. It helps us develop authentic intimacy that includes vulnerability about identity wounds, and we can support our partner's identity healing journey. Negatively, relationship conflicts can be triggered by identity healing changes, and we can use our partner to avoid individual healing work, and there can be spiritual bypassing of necessary relationship healing. So it's important to support each other's healing journey whilst maintaining the relationship as a separate entity that requires its own healing attention. So when we form a relationship, any relationship, there's two or more individuals coming together. So that's, a relationship that each person should be having with themselves, and then the relationship that we create by coming together with others as well that needs attention, and we must never forget that. In terms of hookup relationships, it can bring authentic self-expression to casual encounters, where we can use physical intimacy as part of identity healing when appropriate. But negatively, we can use casual relationships to avoid deeper identity healing work, project identity wounds onto casual partners. We can spiritual bypass intimacy healing through casual encounters, so avoiding committed relationships and just having hookups instead. So it's important to be honest about your healing process and maintain integrity even in casual relationships. If you're single or self-partnered, you can use your independence to focus on deep identity healing work, developing authentic self-love and self-expression, preparing for relationships from a healed perspective rather than from a wounded identity. But we can use independence to avoid healing work triggered by intimacy, and we can spiritual bypass relationship healing through self-partnership. This can lead to healing addiction that avoids authentic connection. So use solitude for genuine healing work rather than avoiding the healing that comes through authentic, intimate connection. In terms of our career development, we can develop a career based on authentic identity and healing gifts, and it can heal, our identity around leadership in our career. We may change to a career, some of us, that integrates personal healing and service to others, but negatively, career confusion due to identity healing changes can happen, and there can be professional conflicts that are triggered by authenticity and spiritual bypassing of necessary career healing. So allow your career to evolve as your authentic identity emerges, comes out, and focus on service that uses your healing wisdom. In terms of personal development, it allows for deep identity healing and integration, development of authentic self-expression, and the transformation of victim consciousness into wounded healer wisdom. But negatively, personal development, addiction without integration, spiritual bypassing of the necessary psychological work, and healing work that increases rather than decreases ego identification. So it's important to focus on integrated personal development that includes both healing, the inner child work, the shadow work, and authentic expression in service to others. In terms of the spiritual development, it can positively integrate our spiritual practices with identity healing, and this can lead to the development of authentic spiritual authority based on vulnerability and wisdom, and spiritual service that includes rather than bypasses psychological healing. Negatively, spiritual bypassing of identity healing work, false spiritual authority based on unhealed wounds, and spiritual practices that increases rather than decreases ego identification. So we really have to watch out for that. This energy can really inflate us and make us not do that needed spiritual inner work or psychological and emotional work that's needed. It's important to develop spiritual practices that support support rather than bypass your identity healing work. In terms of educational development, it's good energy to learn about healing, psychology or spiritual development, and education that supports identity integration, teaching others based on authentic healing experiences. But negatively, it can lead to learning about healing without doing the personal healing work, education or spiritual bypassing, teaching from unhealed wounds rather than integrated wisdom. So it's important to choose education that supports your personal healing journey whilst preparing you to serve others from authentic wisdom. In terms of self-partner development, it can help us develop an authentic relationship with ourselves, healing identity wounds in safe solitude, preparing for future relationships from a healed place rather than a wounded identity. Negatively, it can use self-partnership to avoid healing work triggered by intimacy, spiritual bypassing of relationship healing, and a healing addiction that avoids authentic connection. So use independence for genuine healing work that prepares you for authentic, intimate connection when appropriate. So now I'm going to talk about the best activities for different people to do while Chiron's in retrograde. So if you're more creative, create art that expresses your healing journey and authentic identity, and use creative expression to integrate identity healing work. Allow your creativity to be a vehicle, a channel for healing integration rather than spiritual bypassing. Share your authentic healing through your creative artistic expression. Professionals, develop a professional identity that integrates your personal healing journey, brings authentic leadership and healing wisdom to professional work. Use your professional platform to model authentic leadership based on vulnerability and wisdom rather than perfection. Entrepreneurs, develop businesses that serve collective healing whilst expressing your authentic identity and healing gifts. Build businesses on authentic identity and healing wisdom rather than spiritual bypassing or unhealed wounds. Alternative healers, deepen your own healing work to support authentic healing service to others. Develop healing approaches that integrate identity healing with spiritual development. Make sure your own identity healing is current and ongoing before attempting to help others with similar issues. Lovers, explore intimacy that includes vulnerability about identity wounds and your healing journey. Develop an authentic expression of love that includes rather than hides your healing process. Use intimate relationships as vehicles, opportunities for mutual healing whilst maintaining individual responsibility for personal healing work. For all those who are single and self-partnered, focus on deep identity healing work. Develop authentic self-love that includes acceptance of your wounds and healing journey. Use solitude for genuine healing integration rather than avoiding the healing opportunities that come through authentic, intimate connection. So now I'm going to finish up with some questions that can help you reflect on the different areas of your life while Chiron's in retrograde. So in terms of your financial needs, you can ask, how have my identity wounds affected my relationship with money and financial self-worth, and how can I heal these patterns whilst creating sustainable abundance? So the importance of this question is that identity wounds often affect our sense of deserving financial abundance and our ability to receive appropriate compensation for our gifts. We can also ask ourselves, what financial decisions am I making from my wounded identity versus authentic identity, and how can I align my money choices with my healed self? And this can help us understand how our identity healing affects financial decision making and values. You can ask yourself, how can I use my healing journey and authentic identity as sources of sustainable income whilst maintaining healing integrity? And this helps us integrate authentic identity and sense of self and healing wisdom into our sustainable financial practices. In terms of our emotional needs, We can ask ourselves, what identity wounds am I carrying that prevent me from expressing my emotions authentically, and how can I heal these by developing healthy emotional expression? And this can help us identify wounds that affect our ability to express emotions authentically and appropriately. We can ask ourselves, how can I differentiate how the difference between emotions coming from my wounded identity versus emotions coming from my authentic identity? And this helps us recognize when emotional responses are based on old wounds versus current authentic feelings. We can ask, what would my emotional life look like if I am fully open to my identity wounds as sources of wisdom rather than sources of shame? And this can help us transform the relationship with identity wounds from shame to wisdom. In terms of our spiritual needs, we can ask, how can I integrate my identity healing journey with my spiritual development without spiritual bypassing or becoming addicted to healing? And this can help us balance spiritual practice with psychological healing work. We can ask, what spiritual authority am I meant to embody, so in my actions and thoughts based on my authentic healing journey, and how can I serve others from a healed place rather than my wounded identity? And this can help us develop authentic spiritual leadership based on an integrated healing experience. You can ask yourself, how can I serve collective healing through my individual identity healing work without taking on responsibility for others' healing? And this can help you understand how personal healing contributes to collective healing without becoming codependent. In terms of your psychological needs, you can ask yourself, what aspects of my identity am I afraid to fully express due to past wounding, and how can I heal these fears while developing authentic self-expression? And this can help you identify how identity wounds limit authentic self-expression. You can ask yourself, how can I integrate my shadow aspects and identity wounds into a more cohesive, integrated, authentic identity that serves both my growth and collective healing? And this can help you develop an integrated identity that includes rather than rejects, the wounded sides of your personality. You can ask yourself, what would my life look like if I fully trusted that my identity wounds are meant to be sources of wisdom and service rather than sources of shame and limitation? And this can help you transform the fundamental relationship with identity wounds, seeing your weaknesses as strengths. In terms of your physical needs, you can ask yourself, how do my identity wounds manifest in my physical body, and what does my body need to support the healing and integration of authentic identity? And this can help you understand the physical manifestation of identity wounds and support healing holistically. You can ask yourself, what physical practices support my authentic identity expression and healing integration? And this can help you find physical practices that support identity healing and authentic expression. You can ask yourself, how can I care for my body in ways that honour my healing journey while supporting my authentic identity development? And this can help you integrate physical care with identity healing work. So all in all, Chiron Retrograde in Aries represents an invitation to carve your authentic identity from your life experiences, discovering that your deepest wounds are meant to become your greatest gifts, and that true authentic leadership comes from vulnerability and wisdom rather than perfection. And the complex web of aspects create both challenges and opportunities, asking you to integrate personal healing with collective service, individual authenticity with spiritual authority, and wounded experiences with healing wisdom. And the Sabian symbols paint a beautiful picture of complete identity healing, refining, changing, working with, vibing with your authentic self in service to the collective and yourself, maintaining spiritual dedication despite challenges, bringing divine gifts to earth through discipline, practice, and allowing your essential nature to surface, to emerge through transformative breaking open, allowing your wounds to spill out and learning to manage them. So this retrograde is asking you to become a wounded healer, leader, someone who leads not because they're perfect, but because they're real, who heals not because they've never been broken, but because they've learned to transform their brokenness into beauty. And remember that your identity wounds are not mistakes or failures, that they are the very experiences that qualify you to serve others who are walking similar paths. Your authenticity includes your scars and your healing journey, and is exactly what the world needs right now. And when you're open to your wounds as sources of wisdom rather than shame, you become a beacon of hope, a signal of hope for others who are still fighting battles you've already learned to transform and manage and live with. So Chiron, the cosmic surgeon, is ready to help you carve your authentic cameo, your authentic self, and let your healing become your leading, your wounds become your wisdom, and your authentic identity serve the collective in yourself, because the world desperately needs this. So yeah, I'm Amani, your holistic, karmic, astrological life coach, and this is the end of my very in-depth special on Chiron retrograde. Take care and see you next time.